Hey folks, welcome back to Only Best Fancy Novels. My name is Robin, and today I want to talk about Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. And this is dark academia in the true sense of the word, in the phrase, in multiple ways. And personally, like I can easily imagine this being quite a cathartic book for R.F. Kuang to write, for multiple reasons. But before we get into all of that, what is this book even about? The essential premise is that we follow Alice Law, who is this PhD student who's pretty much on her last leg to get. She's been working for years under the tutelage of Professor Jacob Grimes, who's the premier academic in terms of analytical magic at Cambridge. And this guy is at the top of his field. A recommendation from him is pretty much a golden ticket to anything you could possibly want in the field. So Alice has been struggling as a student for years under his mentorship, and then lab accident results in him being splattered all over the room. So with of course Alice does the obviously same thing that pretty much anyone would do, and immediately starts planning a trip to go to hell to bring Grimes back to life. And this is the story of that trip, for better or for worse. So yeah, like I said, this is dark academia in the true sense of the word. Like, R.F. Kuang is known for being an academic at this point, writing in the field. So her particular take on the genre is very different from what you would expect, and that's exactly what we get here. So first and foremost, I do want to talk about the characters, because we have Alice, who is pretty much exactly what you would expect from an R.F. Kuang main character. She is not a particularly likable person, but through her POV, we essentially get to see the highs and lows of postgraduate academia, what it means, and all the good, the little good and all the bad that comes with it. So in terms of just the way that the field has essentially shrunken in terms of jobs and job security and that kind of thing. The way that people who go into the private sector, they're looked down on for not following an academic the academic trail. We have and then we just have the very very the very lopsided relationship between mentor and mentee, where it comes to the student and their and whoever they work under, and that inherent power balance, and of course everything that comes along with it, like the abuse of privilege, the sexism, you name it, it's there. And what these students are expected to endure for dubious return through this. Of course, that's counterbalanced by the supposed joy of being an academic, working in the field, and existing above the stratum of the unwashed masses, you could call it, not needing to worry about things, such plebeian things like money and living a life, and these sort of crazy. Like, you get the drift. I think at this point anyone watching this video is pretty familiar with what kind of goes on in those circles. Maybe not intimately, but at least have a general idea. And that's kind of what you can expect in this book, like in terms of the elitism, the snobbery, and that kind of thing. And that's before we even get to the particulars of this specific relationship, where Alice is an American and she's come to Cambridge, a very British a very British institution, and let's call it a culture shock difference, as she's essentially a fish out of water in that aspect. Setting all of that aside, we have Alice being a person, not a very likable character for the most part. Like, she's very ambitious, she's very gung-ho, she's willing to subject herself to pretty much anything for the sake of achieving her dream, which is to get this golden recommendation from Jacob Grimes. And the choices that she makes through over the course of this novel multiple times, they those qualities that I mentioned before, those are not what necessarily make her a bad person. Why I would say that she's unlikable as a main character is largely because of the choices that she makes over these over the course of this novel. And yeah, it's just standard for the type of character that R.F. Kuang just likes to write at this point, it seems. So yeah, that's Alice, and the other major character that we follow is Peter, who is Alice's fellow student on the Jacob Grimes, who has a very different but also very similar relationship with Grimes, and he also decides that the obvious thing to do in this particular situation is to go to hell and rescue Grimes. So naturally, there's quite a bit. These two are pretty much have been Grimes' left and right hands for the past however many years. When one is on the rise, the other one is on the dip, you can say. Anyway, so they've gotten a bit of an antagonistic relationship to some extent, but it's also quite clear there's quite a bit of history between them. And what I like about how Peter in particular is represented in this book is that we get, because this is Alice's POV, our first impression of him as a character is entirely based on Alice's preconceptions and biases where it comes to him. And over the course of the novel, as we follow these characters as they journey through hell and we find out more about Peter, we find he doesn't change as a person so much as our understanding of him changes, which is a key difference. And it was really cool to read, to kind of that kind of, I feel like that kind of allowed R.F. Kuang a bit more license than if a character were to just change overnight, for reasons that for just reasons, whatever reasons they are. So in terms of the characters, I would say that they're pretty much standard for as far as her books go. Setting all of that aside, the next thing that we do have to talk about when it comes to this book is obviously the world building, because this is, like I said, this is Dark Academia in a very interesting sense of the word, in that hell is essentially a campus. Especially the early rings, when you venture into that particular existence, and it very much encapsulates what you would expect, like encapsulates elements of campus life in a very interesting way. So, for example, to transition from one ring to another, you need to come up with the perfect dissertation, that kind of thing. Even among the dead, there's elitism, there's snobbery, there's everything you would expect from people who essentially have a superiority complex where it comes to everyone else around them. That kind of stuff. It's a very interesting spin on it. It's a very unique spin, you can say. And as they go further and further through the rings, it only gets more interesting, you can say. On top of that, there's some other aspects of the world building not tied to the structure of hell itself, which was really cool in terms of just the way that this world works and some of the people who've existed in it before and all of that. So there's that. But obviously, it's quite clear the main thing that Alice wants to talk about, or I should say R.F. Kuang wants to talk about over the course of this book, is just academia. And just the reason why I said I could imagine this book being quite cathartic for her to write is just the way that she portrays so much of the negative of academia in this book. And it's if I were putting, like, if I needed to vent my frustration and that kind of thing, with that particular setting, this feels like in many ways some of the things that I would write, or I would gather my thoughts on and just vent out in some way. So, and like I said, that's why I think it can be it could easily be a cathartic process for her. All of that being said, in terms of the book itself, the plot and that kind of thing, it's actually relatively fast paced because it's not a long book by any means, and there are parts of it that can feel bogged down when R.F. Kuang does her whole academic flex on us and introduces so many theories and concepts and ideas and paradoxes and so, and just this, that kind of intellectual stuff that you would expect to encounter when you have an intellectual as your main character, essentially. So like, she's clearly flexing on us with many of these things. But it's part of the story, and it all contributes in some way or some form. It just wasn't necessarily fun to read at different points. But overall, as a book, I feel like ultimately it works. And then I do have to talk about the ending of this book, because the thing that, after I finished putting down my thoughts on this, I decided to just go and check and see how people have been receiving this book, because I finished reading this pretty quickly. I had time off around the time when it came out, and I saw... I, as usual with an R.F. Kuang book, I expect it to be pretty decisive. I expect people to say that it's okay, it's good, or to really bash it for whatever reason. So I kind of went on, started looking up opinions to see what people have to say in terms of negativity. And one of the things that I kept seeing is that many people don't see a point to this book, and that one made me actually scratch my head a bit, because for me, the ending of this book in particular, there's two things about it that I did want to talk about. The first is the plot thread between Alice and Peter. That I didn't care much for, but that's fine, whatever. The main thing I did want to touch on was the ultimate decision taken where it comes to the overall plot of the book. And for me, the way that resolved, it kind of... And it's why I said in some ways that this book is actually uplifted. Because this book reads almost, by the end of it, it reads almost like reading the story of an abuse victim who is finally able to deal with the who's finally stopped repressing the traumatic incidents that they went through, and to finally confront what they endured, and to grow past it in some ways. It reads almost like a Stockholm Syndrome victim who snaps out of it and realizes that the person holding them captive isn't anywhere near as glorious as they thought they were. It reads in that way. It reads like... It's almost like it gave me the feeling that, ignoring the whole sunken cost fallacy, like, it's never too late to just stop where it comes to a bad thing and pivot and change direction, of course, and potentially go off in a new direction that you never expected to go into, especially after you've invested so much time and energy and whatever you've invested into it. It's never too late to pivot and change, essentially. And that's kind of what I got out of this book by the end of it, with just the way so many different things played out. And yeah, and that's why I actually found it like an interesting counterbalance, because we have such a relatively unlikable main character, but then there's what for me feels like the ultimate message of this story, and which is such a drastic difference. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on Katabasis, at least. I'm not sure. I don't see anyone else interpreting this book the way I did, as in part in regards to how the ending goes and that kind of thing. So if you read it and you have similar thoughts, or you want to argue against it, whatever, just drop a comment, let me know. And yeah, if you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.